back there and up a little more. Thank you. Good evening. Is that better? Pat, can you hear me? All right. Folks, welcome to the regular meeting of the Fredericksburg Tea Party of Texas, and we're in our 10th year in existence. If you didn't know that. We are in our 10th year. So this is pretty awesome. Angela is one of the folks that got us started here in 2009. And I believe she was the person that called me, and because my name was on a sign-in sheet somewhere, and we didn't know each other from Adam, and I spent about an hour on the phone telling her why I didn't want to be a member of the Tea Party because they were all crazy. And that was 9 years ago. So we're going into our 10th year. Thank you so much for being with us. Jerry is going to come up and lead us in a prayer, and then we're going to follow that with the pledges. So please stand.
Our gracious Heavenly Father, we come before you on this beautiful day, and we thank you, Lord, that you give us weather like this, and you give us the freedom in this country to still gather in a building like this and discuss the situation with our politics in our city, our county, and our country, Lord. And we just pray that everything that we do here tonight would bring honor and glory to you, and we thank you for it ahead of time. In Jesus' name we ask, amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible. Yeehaw! If you haven't been to one of our meetings before, the yeehaw is something I stole from someone a few years ago. But now I think around the state it is attributed to the Fredericksburg Tea Party. But I'll tell you, I stole it from someone else. So we'll go ahead and take the credit anyway. Thank you again for attending. I'd like to, first of all, we got some announcements and stuff to go through. I'd like to introduce some of our VIP and other candidates. Do we have any elected officials in here? Do we have any elected officials? Yes, ma'am.
I just was elected to Jamie.
Oh, okay. There you go. All right. Thank you. Very good. Very good. And we also have a number of candidates in the room at the time. Matt McCall, who is in the runoff for CD 21, is right there. Okay, that was Catherine that was just introduced, right? Cool. Okay, thank you, ma'am. Jerry Lukenbach is running for City Council. He's City Council now. Nope. Oh, okay. He's here. And Charlie Keeney is running for City Council as well. And so these are our special guests this evening. I would like to start by answering a question that's been on social media about the last 2 or 3 days, and that is why are we only inviting these 3 gentlemen up here today? And I have to tell you, we have been, those of us on the committee, on the steering committee, we know all these candidates who have been around for a long time, and we've vetted and we've looked at all of these people. And we're here to back the people that most agree with what we believe in and what we're fighting for. And quite frankly, you've seen this room when we've tried to have forums in here, and there's just not the room in this venue. And we've had a number of good forums in the town recently for all of these candidates. And so really this is our regular monthly meeting, and we invited these gentlemen to come speak with us tonight. So this was not like an open candidate forum or anything like that. And so please understand that, but we've gotten a lot of flack in the last 48 hours on social media and phone calls and all kinds of things. So that's what we're doing tonight. This is our regular monthly meeting, and these were the speakers that we invited this evening. If you did get one of these agendas on the way in, if you didn't, look at your neighbors. We've got a couple of meetings, a couple of really important things coming up. The next one is this coming Tuesday. night is the 17th. It's going to be down in Kerrville, and it is a debate between Matt McCall and Chip Roy for CD 21. We called dibs on that debate when we realized that that there was going to be a runoff. We tried to call dibs on a debate, and there was a discussion that there were going to be 3 debates, and so we got our name on one of them, and we're going to be working with the Kerr County Republicans on that, and so we've been working with John Elliott down there as the head of the Kerr County Republicans, and this event is going to be at the Hill Country Veterans Center, 411 Meadowview Lane in Kerrville, and please don't ask me where that is because I have not been there yet, nor have I looked it up, so I'm sure my Google machine will get me there. It's like
near the sheriff's office.
Near the sheriff's office. Well, that must have been when you were arrested last time, Jonathan. You knew it?
No, right where they went.
Out by the VA. Okay, I'm sure I'll figure it out. All right, and also, if you've been around a while enough, you know the Hill Country Preppers group and Steve Lehman, and how good they are and what tremendous resource they are to this area and to the Hill Country. Their speaker on Tuesday, it says Tuesday, it's Thursday the 19th, so that's a typo in here. It's Thursday the 19th at Buzzy's Barbecue, another good excuse to go eat barbecue. And their speaker that night is going to be Jeffrey Adicott. And Professor Adicott is the director of the Center for Terrorism Law at St. Mary's University. And he's been a guest speaker here. He literally wrote the book on terrorism law. And I think you can, I think it's available for purchase, but I think it's about this big and would make a great boat anchor. But it's out there. He is one of the highest experts on terrorism and terrorism law in the country. And he happens to live right here in the Hill Country. We've had him speak here before. He's amazing. It's well worth your drive over to Kerrville next Thursday to see Jeffrey Adicott. Thursday, April 26th, Gillespie County Republican Club quarterly dinner, and you need to RSVP for those, and that's through the Frommies, I believe. Okay, and then our next meeting, this is really important, our next regular monthly meeting, which will be the second Thursday in May, and that's May 10th, will not be in this room. It's going to be at the Hill Country University Center in the HEB room. And the reason we're doing that is because that evening our guests are going to be Empower Texans. And so it's kind of a 2-part meeting. And if you paid any attention to the local media during our HD 27 primary and during the primaries, there was a lot of Empower Texans got mentioned a lot in the paper. And it was always those evil lobbyists out of West Texas. They're not lobbyists, they're not evil, and they're not out of West Texas. So anyway, they're going to be here. We're going to give them an evening to really open for Q&A. And they're not sending their regular spokesman who just graduated from college. They're sending over Michael Quinn Sullivan, who is the director, Tony McDonald, and if you've ever heard Tony, he speaks here about every 2 years. He always gives us the report after the legislative session is over, and he is absolutely entertaining and great. And then Terry Cheshire and several others. So they're going to bring their whole party over. We're going to be running some large ads in the paper for several weeks. We're going to push this out. The community needs to get to know who Empower Texans are. All right, and why we stand by them and why they are a great organization. And yet again, once again, no, they are not lobbyists. And so that's going to be important. The next meeting, and I think you'll really enjoy it. You'll get a lot out of it. And we're also part of that meeting is going to be kind of a reintroduction of the Fredericksburg Tea Party. Who are we? What do we stand for? And what are we really doing? Because even after 9 years of being in this town, there's still a lot of people that have no idea what we stand for, what we do, what we fight for, how we're involved. And so we're going to kind of reintroduce ourselves at that meeting as well. So please, please put that on your calendar the second Thursday of next month, May 10th, and we will be out at the Hill Country University Center in the HEB room. Okay, where are we? Judy, would you come down and give us a treasurer's report, please? Judy McCorkle.
That's a list of the things I do. We have about $3,700 in our treasury. We need to expand it. There's a lovely jar back there for donations. And we as the steering committee decided we would also ask you to help us pay for this room each time. You know, we got really spoiled being at the brewery. Of course, we couldn't hear anybody or think about things, but it was free. So now we have a fee each month, and I have a sign-up sheet. Check it before you go. If you put your name on it, I'll remind you that you're going to pay $75 for us. Thank you for that. Matt McCall is here, and I have worked down in his office this week, and we have some stickers. If you have a big sign, a 4x4 or bigger, he would like you to put this on because it says Vote May 22nd. We've got a little confusion going on because we've got May 6th or 5th here and May 22nd for the actual primaries. So please think about those things. We do need your donations. We need your membership. We are now at 66 members that are paid. Yes. $20 for the year, and I always mention that it says on top of the form, membership has its benefits. It does. It does. Not just that you're nailed as a tea partier, which is not bad these days, but that you are part of a group that is really moving ahead. And remember, we're trying for May to get together a tour of the Capitol. We're waiting for Representative Biederman to come back into the country to establish a date because he wants to be sure to be in his office the day we tour the Capitol. We will be part of a tour, but then we will go to his office and hopefully Don Buckingham as well.
Yeah.
We will probably rent a van as we've done in the past, which will be a nominal fee for you to ride, which that's the best part of all, I assure you. Don't have to worry about parking, don't have to worry about the fees, but we will keep you posted on that. But it will probably be in May. We'll eat. But the tour of the Capitol is something I assure you, you will never forget because it's very different than what you may have in your mind. The art alone is unbelievable. So, don't forget your stickers for your big signs. Matt could use some more help over in Bertie. I went over the other day. If you'd like to talk on the phone, it's a great way to do it. We got plenty of training on the Biederman campaign, so I know he would appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Okay, so that's all I have.
Thank you. Thank you, Judy.
I do have the membership forms, by the way.
Okay, see Judy for your membership. Okay, I left. I didn't have my glasses on when I was looking at this. The Professor Adicott's talk is going to be on the Trump doctrine and national security and terrorism. So that is the topic of Professor Adicott's speech or talk next Thursday the 19th. And also, I did not read on here for next Tuesday, help us with cookies. And of course, that's always true. You can never have too many cookies. But we help us with, what's that? We have a link. Okay. All right, so there's something on our website and going out in emails as well that you can sign up to bring cookies. And don't call Irene, she's already bringing cookies, so you don't have to hit her up. So, all right, did Carol show up? Carol Reed? Carol, are you? Oh, there you are, Carol. Come on up. Carol is the newest president of the Gillespie County Republican Women. Welcome.
Thank you. Hi. I wanted to talk a brief moment and just say that I am the president of the Gillespie County Republican Women, and it has been exciting and challenging, and the club is not yet what we want it to be, but we are forging for a great future, and I'm so excited, and I'm really trying to get everybody to just make a difference. Every one of us can make a difference in this world. Speak up, do something, volunteer, do something, but we all have to get involved. Our meetings are now going to be on the first Wednesday of the month, and we meet in this room from 11:30 to 1. So 11:30 to 12 is meet and greet, and then our meeting starts. So would love to see some of you attend as well. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. And I felt really out of place the first time I went to the Gillespie County Women's Club. I had to get permission. I said, y'all let boys in here? And they said, no, but we let men in. So I was like, okay, thank you very much. So anyway, men and boys are available to go to that, their meetings, their monthly meetings, and they've had some really good speakers over the years. They actually invited me to speak one time. So they'll let anybody in there. Really good group. Another elected spot in the Republican Party that is very important is the Executive Committee. The Executive Committee, come on down, Mary Jane. The Executive Committee, there is a man and a woman from each Senate district in the state. And these are the ones that, if you're looking at the hierarchy in the Republican Party, these are the guys who can make a huge difference. And so they're called the SREC, State Republican Executive Committee. And whoever's on that committee makes some pretty big decisions. And sometimes those decisions are pretty tough. Our interim chairperson now, James Dickey, when the last chairperson stepped down in the interim, James Dickey was elected by the SREC. And by one vote, and it was a tiebreaker vote, wasn't it, from the city. So this is a very, very important seat. And how many districts are there? 37?
Well,
No, how many?
31.
31 SDs. There's 31 SDs, so there's 62 people on that, on the SREC. And they're the ones that you're supposed to be able to call them and what have you. We have had pretty good relationships in the past with our SREC, and I have not had a chance to visit with Mary Jane Avery, but I'll give her the microphone here, and welcome to Fredericksburg.
Well, thank you so much. This is a fabulous crowd, and I never think of myself as the top of the heap. I kind of think I'm at the bottom of the food chain, because my purpose in serving on the SREC is to have a servant's heart for you. And even though the SREC does tackle some controversial topics, my stance is if you remain true to the principles of our platform, you can never go wrong. And sometimes some of those folks need to remember that. But I am running to be your SREC committee woman. Each senatorial district has a man and a woman. Jack Barcroft is our committee man. I'm running to be the committee woman. So for any of you who are going to be an alternate or a delegate to the state convention in June, that is where you'll have a fantastic opportunity to vote for me. And I would really appreciate support within your delegation. I do have an opponent, but I have been a long time conservative activist since Richard Nixon was my first campaign, and that was in high school. And I have served, in fact, I served on the SREC 20 years ago. I lived in Beaumont 30 years, and 4 years ago we moved to Burnet, Texas, where we live now. And my husband is a retired retina surgeon. But anyway, we are committed to be boots on the ground for the 17 counties that Jack and I represent. And just visiting with Annette and a couple of people at our table tonight, it looks like you are a great, strong team for block walking, for making phone calls. You know, how many people have heard on the television of the blue wave coming? I think that's a fake out for one thing. But I want SD24 to be the red tsunami. And that takes action, making friendships, making relationships, being here for your county chairman. Carol's doing a wonderful job with the Republican women here. And so my message to you is that I'm a very hard worker. I'm going to be traveling. I've traveled to almost each county, talked with each county chairman, been to almost each Republican women's groups. I want to be boots on the ground to help keep our SD24 red, keep the Democrats out, and I want everybody to start uniting and working together because we have one common enemy, and then those are the Democrats. So anyway, for those of you that are going to be in San Antonio, I look forward to saying yes.
Do you support James Dickey?
I do support James Dickey.
You're
However, if Cindy Ash should win, I will work with her as well. But in fact, for James's, I went to the SREC election that day, and just as a hobby, I make decorated cookies. And so I made cookies with James's campaign information on each cookie, beautifully packaged for each voting SREC member that day. So James likes to joke that he thinks it was my cookies that gave him the extra vote.
I like
But anyway, for those coming to the convention, it's going to be a great convention, and you can follow me on Facebook, and I'll have the itinerary for the convention. And for those not, I will, hopefully, if I win my election, I'll be seeing you again in the next 2 years. So thank you very much. And you all are doing great work here in Fredericksburg.
I just wanted to show off to Mary Jane. I'm sorry about that. Mary Jane, if you're a delegate or a alternate to the state convention, raise your hand.
Excellent.
Look at that. 1, 2, 3. Keep them up there. I want to count them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. That is awesome. Thank you so very much.
Thank you.
So there you go. So Mary Jane, there's a check in the mail for each one of those. Is that how this works? Oh, okay. All right. Okay. Next, I would like to invite Mickey Poole up here, and Mickey is going to introduce our speakers for the evening, and he has something to read first. So, Mickey, come on up.
Thank you. First, we want to thank the Tea Party as far as just for giving us this exposure, and that I think from all of us, we recognize the change in the politics over the last 5-10 years, and think the Tea Party is very much part of that grassroots movement that has allowed our country to stay great and move forward in that direction. I've written some notes down as far as I've worked with Tim and Jim and Mo. None of us knew each other 3 months ago. Activities in Fredericksburg have deteriorated to the stage that we said we've got to get involved, and that Fredericksburg's too important to us. We want to make a change. Fredericksburg, the jewel of the hill country. Your city's worth approximately $1.9 billion. That's your assets. Average household value is about $300,000. Average taxes per year, $5,370, or about $447 a month. $450 a month is what you're having to save to pay for taxes. The city currently is operating at a cost of $50 million. That's at a $3 million deficit. They couldn't contain their budget in $47 million. We had to do $3 million more. You finally have the opportunity to make your voice heard. You get to vote May 5th. Elections last year were canceled. These three are conservatives. They want to work for you, the citizens. They want to encourage and solicit the resident participation and engagement, knowing your voice matters. They're all fiscally conservative in operations and projects. They want to serve the basic needs: safety, health, utilities, roads, infrastructure. They want to protect the heritage and charm that has created this jewel of the city. We would like you on May 5th to reject the liberal re-elects that canceled the elections to purchase property, that increased your taxes $28 million over the last 4 years, that increased debt by $10 million over the last 4 years, that are operating with a $3 million deficit spending this year. Regulation has increased by 4-fold. Citizen input has been wasted on deaf ears. $1.2 million has been wasted on consultants. Over $11 million of your money has been given to developers to put a hotel at the far end of town by the post office and give property away over across from the HEB. If you can only imagine what that's going to do to traffic, because we still don't have a relief route in sight. There are other discussions, or a rain tax. They want to raise $640 million for taxing the rain that comes down on your property. They want to increase the regulations to restrict your property rights. My question to you is, what's next, Fredericksburg? These guys, they hear you and they want to serve you. We appreciate it.
So I'm going to let these guys introduce themselves, and then I'm going to start off with a few questions, and then we're going to take the mic out into the audience and let you ask questions after that. So you guys introduce yourself, please. And there's another mic right here.
Hi there. My name's Tim Lafferty. I'm running for mayor.
Yeah, whatever you want to do.
Okay.
Stand up, Tim.
Stand up higher, right? Anyway, just to dispel one thing right off the bat, I'm not from West Texas. Actually, I'm from way out west. I grew up 2 miles from where the Beach Boys grew up. My older brother went to high school with them, so I don't think they surf in West Texas. I moved, when I was pretty young, I moved over to Las Vegas to go to college. And I got a degree in hotel administration from UNLV. I was there before Jerry Tarkanian, so it tells you it's been a while. Because in that degree thing, you had to work 800 hours of practical experience to graduate. I started my junior year at the Sahara Hotel. By my senior year, I was the director of tour and travel for that property. It was 1,000 rooms. I had great mentors. From there, I got married 43 years ago, so I had to make a little bit more money, so I moved down to the Sands when Howard Hughes owned it, and I dealt with a number of people, and the hotel thing has gone that way really ever since. I finally got up to a point where I was the director of sales and marketing for the Beverly Hills Hotel Corporation. We had 46 properties in 3 states. Well, I was involved intricately with staffing, hiring, marketing, you name it. I mean, we made money in it. We had 43 hotels that were great. That company was bought in a leveraged buyout. I moved back to Las Vegas, and I worked many years at the Flamingo Hilton Hotel. That's the largest and most profitable hotel in the Hilton chain. It's got 3,642 rooms. In the year 2000, we netted $112.5 million in net. So with that experience, I know the negative and the positive impacts that hospitality can provide your town. I don't think they're going to build a pork plant anytime soon out on 290. So tourism is a big part of this town, and the Heritage, of course, is a big town. And I think that I've got the background to approach that in a fiscally conservative way, in a way that it doesn't impact the locals in a negative way. That's where we are right now. I know we're going to have some questions. I look forward to those questions. I'm going to turn it over to Jim Bennett.
Angela, thank you, and Matt, and Jerry, and Judy for hosting us. We appreciate it. I was born in Dallas, but I've been told that I don't need to tell anybody that my accent gives me away. So, nevertheless, I moved to Houston at the age of 6, and Annette, my brother John, and I started a business there in the early 70s. We had that business. It was a retail chain of stores. We ended up in 2 states, 7 locations in Texas. We learned about bottom lines, payroll, rent, employee issues, you name it. Until you've made payroll, you really can't appreciate what a business owner goes through. I can feel the pain of the downtown business owners as they see their business eroding and their rents going higher, and it's not a good formula for success. After Houston, I moved to Austin. I sold commercial real estate, farms, and ranches. I attended many city council meetings that lasted until 6 in the morning. And in horror, I watched as the city fathers did absolutely nothing to manage the growth that they had that was coming their way. And believe me, as we all see Austin now, this was evident back in the 80s, and they just didn't want to see growth. They thought that they could restrict it and keep people out by enforcing or passing ordinances that didn't make it conducive for outsiders to come in. Well, guess what? They made it. We all know that. We had the S&L crisis while I was in Austin, and I had the great opportunity to pack up and leave and head to Florida, where I purchased property for a real estate syndication group. I did that for a couple of years and then ended up working for one of the new cellular companies, which was a baby Bell called Bell South. I did that for 10 years, where I was in charge of real estate and construction, and my job was to do the planning, zoning, permitting, ordinance writing, meeting with mayors, council members, police chiefs, fire chiefs, you name it. We interacted, or I interacted with everybody at the governmental level in our attempts to get towers, which were not very popular, as you might believe, approved and put into a community before people really appreciated what cellular telephones were. So from there, I ended up starting an electrical contracting business. I did that for almost 15 years. I was able to sell the business, retire, and Tony and I moved to Fredericksburg, where I don't think you could pry us out of here with a crowbar right now. We love it. We're here by choice. We could have gone anywhere in the country, and we chose to come here, and we're thrilled with our decision. Thanks.
Okay, I'm Mo Saidi, and I need about 2 hours to talk about my lifestyle. But if you have a hard time pronouncing my name, Mo Saidi, you may call me Klaus Schweinsteiger. So that may go a lot better in this town. But let me tell you, I have been in this country since 1970. Can you hear me here?
Yeah, keep it close.
Okay. And I came here at the age of 19. I came to complete my higher educations, and I fell in love with this country, and I never went back. So I have been here, out of the 48 years that I have been in this country, about 45 years of those I have been in Texas, with the exception of 3 years that I went to Seattle to work for Boeing Company. So all my life I have been in Texas, and I consider this my hometown, and I love the place. And when we retired, when I retired in 2015, I moved my family here, and we just love the community. I have been married to my wife for 43 years. I married into an Irish-Japanese Catholic family. I have had the Irish Irish from time to time, so that's been charming with my father-in-law. They're all from military background, and I consider myself the only civilian in that family. But it's been wonderful. It's been a wonderful experience. It's been wonderful knowing other cultures and other diversities in my life. We do have 2 sons, and we are members of St. Mary's. Now, I want to tell you a little bit about my background and tell you why that relates to the work of the city. I am a graduate of the University of Texas in Austin. I have had a BS and a master's in mechanical engineering. I graduated in 1977, and shortly after that, I went to work for Boeing in Seattle on 767 airplane program. And one thing after another, I moved to Houston and I worked on the space shuttle program. And if you are, some of you may know, the Air Force was pretty much active in that time with the shuttle program, and I had to have secret clearance to process some of their secret missions. In the last 15 to 20 years, I have spent primarily in the design, development, and operation of International Space Station. In that work, when I left in 2015 and I retired from Boeing after 37 years, I was senior project manager for Boeing. What that means as a project manager, and I want to relate this to the work of the city, is that really as a project manager, you're working with requirements, you're working with contractors, you're working with design options, with technicalities, and you have to balance the budget. You got to be on time, you got to deliver on time, and you got to meet your customers' expectation. In this case, my NASA customers. In the case of the city, that if I were fortunate to be there, I have to do the same thing. I have to manage the budget, I have to look at the budget, I have to scrutinize the projects that come in. There is really no difference. When we looked at the station projects, for example, and we look at the pros and cons, advantages, disadvantages, cost effectiveness of some, what are the customer's expectations? It's the same thing when we have a space, or I should say a park, sports complex comes forward, is no different than any other project. You got to look at the pros and cons, you got to look at all the advantages, disadvantages, what does it bring to town, what does it not bring to town, the difficulties, the operating costs, what are our schedules, meeting on demand, and meeting your customer expectation. In this case, my customers would be the citizens of this town. No different at all. So with that in mind, I think I have done that. In my job, I have had, when I left, I had a staff of 80 highly educated people. I had 5 subcontractors that provided some complicated hardware for us, including like Allied Signals and United Technologies, Lockheed Martin. And it just happens that my area of specialty is environmental control and life support, which I have had this discussion with Kent Meyer, our city manager, and I say, when I sit at the city council and you guys talk about fires, you talk about water, you talk about waste, those are the kind of things that a traditional environmental control life support system people do. When we put someone in the zero environment of a space, we have to provide for his life and for his daily living. And those are not different for me, and it is really brings up a lot of memories and backgrounds, and as I listen at the county commissioners or at the city council, and the topic comes in with respect to water processing or waste management and emergency scenarios. So it is pretty much what I'm capable of doing, and I'm very much comfortable with that. And one of the things that I want to bring up is that really I got into this race. You may ask, why are you doing these things? I had no interest of getting involved in the politics and all that sort of things. I have been very much involved at the city council, and I think Jerry and Charlie knows that. I have provided comments, inputs, presentations. I have gotten up and talked about the problems and my concerns from what I hear from my neighbors and others. I have been able to be the voice of the citizens behind the scene. I have dealt into the budget, 160 pages of it at the county as well as the city. So I have looked at both sides of the aisles, and I know what ticks on one side and doesn't tick on the other side, and what can be done on both sides of it. I have to admittedly say I have had also very good support from the city and the county, where one of the projects that I led, and it was the road cleanup. My wife and I go cycling around the hill country, and we noticed road litters practically everywhere. This beautiful country and the jewels of hill country of Texas is littered with trash. And one of the things that I did, I led the team for 2 years. We met every other week or so, and we hashed out the problems, and we ended up with setting up a campaign of Keep Our Community Beautiful at the city. We worked with the FISD to develop the posters. We passed those on. I have written articles about it. As a matter of fact, the latest article is in the City Esteem magazine. If you haven't read it, I urge you to go read it. And for the very first time in the history of Gillespie County, we have implemented Adopt a County Road. And today we have about 6 or 7 sponsors that they have adopted various roads in precincts 1, 2, 3, and 4. So I find a lot of pride in that, and it could be done. And that's a good example of working with the city and the county to bring the people together for the good of the community. So I leave it as that, and I'm sure there are a lot of questions to be asked, and I'd be more than happy to answer them. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mo. Appreciate it.
All right, I'd like to start the questions off. I do not live in the city limits, and most of our regular members of the Fredericksburg Tea Party are also in the same boat. They live in the county, but not in the city. And we've talked a lot about how the importance of being involved in what's happening in town. Annexation is my question. During the last legislative session, there was a bill that passed and the governor signed that restricts the larger metropolitan areas from annexing without getting a vote from the people who are being annexed. And so there was quite a bit of discussion on that, and I went to several of the committee hearings on that. But our city is not covered by that new law. So the city of Fredericksburg could come in, and everybody in the area they want to annex could not even want to be annexed, but they could force them to be annexed. And so I want to know where the three of y'all come from, or if you have one answer and all want to give it, but whatever. The idea of annexing someone either against their wishes, or how do you get, where do y'all stand on this annexation?
Well, that's a good question, Matt. The annexation has cost. So when they run utilities out to the folks that might be annexed, there's some real costs that have to be analyzed. Most people probably don't know it. The earliest that you would pay for city services, but the earliest they're probably going to get the utilities out to you is like a little over a couple years. They have up to 4.5 years to provide that. So you might be paying city taxes for a little more years before you get those services. So I think that the city should feel ethically obligated to speak to the landowners and get their take on it, rather than sending out letters with a 2-week response time. If you don't respond within about 2 weeks, Mickey had that happen. He had discussed it before, but some of the people got blindsided with letters that you had 2 weeks to respond or you'd be automatically annexed. Now, some people have exemptions due to agricultural exemptions or wildlife exemptions and so forth. But still, all in all, as far as your question about how does it work here, they can go on a mile, and then the next mile, and the next mile, and the next mile, and you have to weigh those costs. Now, one thing that's kind of interesting is, let's take an example where it's not annexed. There's a kind of a myth that has evolved that we send a lot of millions of gallons of effluent water to Boot Ranch. Now, Boot Ranch probably won't get annexed anytime in my lifetime, because they're like about 14 miles out of town. But that's not all we provide. It's not just effluent water. It's 76 million gallons of effluent water, but it's 89 million gallons of drinking water. It goes to Boot Ranch. That's pretty considerable. In addition, we process their wastewater, their sewage, and the city just approved, and it's in the budget, a lift station that costs $340,000. That's the courtesy of our tax dollars in the city. Sure, we've got some impact fees up front, but still, that shows you the kind of costs that are involved. And oh, by the way, do we have enough water? Anybody that drives between here and California in the south, that drives over creeks or rivers, well, simply water is going to become a very, very big issue. The ability just to have water. And water rights are being sold right and left. It's a big deal. So I think that you have to look at all of those things. Do we have enough waste sewage things? Can we take that impact? Can we do the water? By the way, those 3 new hotel projects, the one out on 16, the Spod, the Chaseby Scottsdale on 375 acres. I know they've got a couple wells, but I bet it's going to be supplemented somewhat. Even if that's not the case, the 160 some odd unit hotel and conference center and the Uford Street project, which has been downgraded to 80 rooms. If you've ever been in a commercial hotel, when the maids get in at about 5 in the morning, They start the washing machines, and they go all night long. They go all day and all night. People that stay in a room that costs a couple $100, they use every towel that's in the room. Every towel in the room. Sometimes they take 2 showers. There's usually a swimming pool. If somebody throws a bottle over the fence or throws debris in it, guess what happens? They drain the pool. If you go to a bigger property like that, they wash down the sidewalks. They have mister systems in the summertime. None of that stuff's supposed to happen, but that's the reality of it. So there's lots of water issues that I have questions about. And before annexation takes place, I think there has to be a thorough analysis of how that's going to impact the city.
Okay.
At the last forum, I said something, and I woke up in the morning and I went, did I really say that? It related to social engineering, and I'm not for social engineering. I believe in free market enterprise. One of the things that's complex about annexation, and if you take Matt's point about the larger cities requiring a vote, that's going to gridlock the city. Now, is there anything wrong with gridlocking San Antonio or Austin? I don't think so. But it's not going to be able to get passed, because if you ask the general citizenry if they're for or against annexation, the answer is going to be 99% of the time, I think no. While I was in Florida, I developed a industrial complex, and the city came to me and said, we need your land. I said, okay, let's talk. And they gave me utilities, they gave me industrial zoning, they gave me everything I needed, and they got what they wanted. They needed to leapfrog over my property and get to the next large parcel. So in that instance, it was a good thing. With regards to Fredericksburg, if we don't annex out towards the west, we're going to find ourselves with clutter and unattractive development because the city has no control. And I don't think that that's what we want. I think that there's a little misconception about what the city really wants to do, and the letters that they sent out, and I spent an hour and a half with Brian Jordan, head of development, and with Mickey, and he said, we just sent out a cursory initial letter. It wasn't registered. We just sent it out to see who was interested in talking to us. I believe that if generally you go to the city and you work with the city, you're going to find that you're going to come out way ahead. If you have an ag exemption and you don't want to be annexed, as long as they don't have to have a leapfrog piece of property, they're going to tell you that you don't have to be annexed. But if you make one single change to your property, then you automatically agree, without saying anything further, that you do agree to be annexed into the city. So I think it's a double-edged sword. In our instance, I think that it's important. I don't think that we want to see our entry to our city turn out to look like Kerrville or Houston, Texas. So without having to wake up at 3 in the morning and go, oh my gosh, what did I say tonight? I think there's pros and cons, and it's not just a simple, straightforward answer. Thank you.
Thanks.
Does this work?
There you go.
Does it work?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I think if I understand the question on the annexation was more in terms of public participation or landowners' participation in that process.
Yeah, that was kind of what I was getting at.
Right. So, in that regard, I am, for one, very much committed to having public engagement in the decision-making process on some of these major projects that come through the City Council. The reason I say that is because, number one, we have in this town, and I have been so amazed in the 3 years that I have lived here, I have met so many wonderful, educated, highly skilled people in this town that bring so much experience and knowledge that if we don't really take that into account and use that in our decision-making process, we're not doing ourselves a service. That's said, number one. Number two, it's also when you have the public engagement into the process, it really brings up the outcome that is sanctioned by the community. the outcome is a lot better, and it's ownership of that by the community that sanctions that. So to me, it's much a stronger outcome that comes out of that. Now, as far as annexation goes, I think the city is growing. There's no question about it. We all know that. People are coming in here, but they're buying properties, and it's growing. So it's inevitable that the annexation is going to happen. Part of the annexation is also having the zoning requirement that goes along with that. So it's really a two-step process that goes in. Like we just saw at the City Council about 290 annexation. The annexation is proceeding, but then the city has to come forward with the zoning, exactly how we're going to use these properties for. Is it industrial? Is it commercial? Is it agricultural or multifamily use, and so forth and so on? And that's really what shapes the outcome of the annexation and how our city is going to look like. And we are smart enough, and if we take people's input into account, and those who have been here for many years and they know the history, the legacy in here, and take that into account and come up with a smart decision, I think our city would be served very well.
Thanks, Mo. Appreciate it. I'm going to kind of follow up on that on the next question. That has to do with citizens' involvement in the city council. And I've been to a few of the meetings, not as many as you. I think you've been to every meeting in the last 3 years, Mo. Is that right? Something like that?
More or less.
More or less. Okay, so Mo is there every time. I know Jerry McCorkle goes to nearly every single meeting. And one of the things I've found out is there's a little bit of a at the end of the process is a time when citizens can come in and you can say say what you want to say, but there is you can't interact with the city council, because I wanted to go and ask them what attainable housing means. To me, that's the most ridiculous word I've ever heard. Everything is attainable. So I wanted to be able to say, but they won't answer your questions. So I know there's got to be a process by which that we can get more citizen involvement, and knowing when the first reading and the second reading and all these things go on, make it more of an issue, and to get more public involvement. And I really appreciate what you've said about we've got a lot of brains in this town. Let's use them. That's a resource. And so, how would you consider, or what would, if you had a magic wand to wave over the city council and make it more friendly to citizen involvement? We'll start at this end this time.
Yeah, I'd like to answer that. And you're right, and I think the councilmen back there know me, that I show up in there. And I just don't show up in there. I do my homework behind the scene. Usually when the agenda comes out, there is a 1-inch thick package associated with it on the topics. You need to go study those, understand it, make sure you are comfortable with it. I have generally fired up my comments to the councils and the mayors for their inputs, and then when the opportunity comes at the council, we talk about it. But let me tell you personally, having gone through this process for about 3 years, I have to say I have been very frustrated with the process. I have told the mayor, I've told Kent Myers about it, and honestly, one of the reasons that I am kind of coming into running for this position is that is a progression of my activism at the council, at the city, but I want to take it up a notch up and then work within the inside. And one of the things is I would like to make sure that, like I said, that there is ample time given to serious projects or topics that comes in. We're not rushing through the ordinances. We're not rushing through the decision makings. We have to take every opportunity that we have to have public hearings. Sports complex was a good example of it. We should have had dozens of, if not, half a dozen of those public hearings on those. At times, we should have citizens forums to advise us and tell us what's going on in this. Because let's face it, I don't have all the answers, nor I'm expected to have all the answers. But I have enough smarts to say what makes sense, what doesn't make sense. And those are the kind of things that at times I feel like a city council we are not given, a topic is not given ample time, debate, discussions, and really probing questions to vet the issues that comes up, so we make a smart decision at the end. And so I am all for more public hearings. I'm all for citizens forums to come in and advise us. I am not so much for consultants who come out of Dallas and Austin or somewhere to tell me what I have to do with the parking in downtown, which I already know what we have to do with parking in downtown, and we pay $20,000 for it. So that, to me, again, and that is, consultants are good in certain things, but in certain areas, I think the public would serve us a lot better in that regard. Okay.
I had the opportunity the other day to mention to someone who I didn't know, but he was on one of the committees for the study of the ball field question. And I made the comment that the city appeared arbitrary and that the decisions were poorly thought out. And he attacked me like a duck on a June bug and said that wasn't true and I didn't know what I was talking about. And I said, well, tell me. But as soon as he led into me, I said, let me rephrase my comment. I said, the city gives the appearance of not having completely thought through all of the issues. And so he said, well, I think that's fair. And then I said, and also, I think that the sports complex was rushed. Now, there may have been some great, fabulous reasons why it was rushed, but the community didn't know those reasons. Jerry and Charlie sitting back there know the reasons. I've since found out the reasons. But it's important to us to note, one of the challenges in Fredericksburg is communication to the voters. And there's not one simple method of communicating that seems to work all the time. So a suggestion that I had was, instead of rushing through a second reading, why don't we let a proposed ordinance breathe a little bit, let the community talk about it over breakfast, let the newspaper do an article, let Facebook cover some of the issues, but let's don't rush through these issues, but the citizens feel as though that's exactly what's happening. Thank you.
Well said, guys. As far as the meetings, there'd be one real easy solution as far as getting more input, is that you don't put the discussion thing at the bottom of the page after the city council and mayor voted on the issue. Then that's what it is now. Unless it's a special thing. So if, let's say that General Hagee or the sports complex people that are pushing for the park, they'll adjust the format so that those people can speak freely. But if you look at just look them up on each every other week agenda, it's at the bottom. And that's after they voted. Now the thing that where it became most obvious to me, and it kind of got me thinking about running, was when they had the B&B thing, because hospitality things are kind of my background and hobby, and that's what I did for so long. It took about 2 years to quit thinking about it. But I tell you, when they had well, they don't call them B&Bs anymore, they're STRs. Short-term rentals. Well, I think that's kind of like dehumanizing. It's sort of like STRs, STDs, things like that. It's an acronym of some kind. But anyway, they had the meeting, and there were people that got up and gave really thoughtful and salient. They had concerns. What about this? What about that? What about turning people away? Like which I brought up later. With Hilton, I took a lot of seminars on a variety of subjects, and one of it was discrimination. We spent like about 3 or 4 days in Dallas going over that very matter. When you deny a group, it doesn't seem like you're discriminating, but if it's a protected group, it's a group of African Americans, it's a group of all women, if it's a group of gay or lesbian people, if you deny them, if they call your bed and breakfast and say, if they say, do you have 5 double rooms? Yeah, we got 5 double rooms, it's 10 people. Well, I'm with a group. Well, we don't do groups. We have an ordinance that says we don't do groups. Well, that can put you right into litigation. And I've talked to the city attorney a couple times, that they need to either reword that or eliminate it. but so far I don't think that's happened. There's a number of other issues with that, but the fact that people got up and talked and gave things, they said, this is the second reading. What do you think? Yeah, sure, okay, I. And that's the way the vote went. And that ordinance has deep repercussions. You're talking about a cottage industry, okay? There was a big discussion, which seems to have been forgotten, about attrition. Was anybody there at that meeting when they talked about am I right? I'm not making this up. There was about a 15 or 20 minute discussion about attrition, how we're going to narrow down the number of B&Bs to some kind of number that they picked out of the air, down to 400 or whatever. So you've got the ones that are still around, the winners, and then you have the people that are probably targeted that are going to be the losers. Now, some of these people have invested their entire life savings. Now, my financial advisor wouldn't suggest that, but they've invested heavily in these properties, and they've sunk a lot of money into keeping them up. It helps our city. It makes it look more attractive. People like being out in the suburbs and jogging in the suburbs and talking with the locals. It gives them a sense of what the city's all about. The heritage, the German heritage, the friendly people. People think that people like come to Fredericksburg for the scenery and for the architecture. Well, that's part of it. But part of it is the people. I'm heavily involved. My wife and I both, when we moved here 14 years ago, got involved with volunteering. Okay. The two of us have spent thousands of hours doing volunteer work at the hospital. It's a great, in fact, the Malcolm Baldrige Foundation named it the best rural hospital in America. It's a great hospital. I was there today. They had the original auxiliary people from 1971. A lot of these ladies were in their 90s. They celebrated their service. These people used to work from 9 to 6, 7 days a week to get that hospital up off the ground. And I believe in that hospital, and the medical professionals and the volunteers are inspiring. My wife and I both do work for the Fredericksburg Theater Company. That rose out of nowhere with Gerald Hoover, who was a former mayor. My wife and I do rinky-dink stuff with the sets, but she's in charge of the scene painters. She's working for Barefoot in the Park right now. It's her 27th set. She's been in charge of the scene painters. She puts in at least 1,000 hours. So anywho, the people come here for the people. And I think that these B&Bs will allow tourists, visitors, to mingle with the people.
Thank you, Tim. Let's take some of your questions. There's the fastest hand that went up. Please bring the mic right up to your mouth. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Sonia Rivera. First of all, I wanted to just thank each of you for running and listening to you also at the Chamber Forum. It's heartening to hear your points of view, which are sadly lacking in our current City Council, as dedicated as all those folks are. What you're saying, I completely agree with. I have a serious problem, however, with something that you said, each of you said, at the other forum, and that is that you each support expansion of the historic district. Everyone in my neighborhood does not want to be in the historic district. We're targeted to be so. Unless the entire city is, then everyone is targeted to be so. But even in the interim, whatever, shorter expansion, we're targeted. And we don't want to be in any historic district. We specifically bought our homes because it was not in a historic district. And I find it inconsistent with another statement that you said, and that is each of you said that you support your big property rights proponents. And you were talking about that in the context of a question regarding too much wine drinking in the streets or something like this. And so I wanted to just tell you I have a real problem, and maybe you want to clarify it, but it is completely inconsistent with your property rights point of view. It's inconsistent with anybody talking about finding affordable housing, because if anything, expanding the historic district does nothing except make housing far more expensive in this town, aside, but the big issue for us is property rights. We don't want to be expanded into. Thank you.
Thanks, Sonia. Good question.
Well, I'd like to answer that. Actually, going back to that debate, I didn't actually comment on that. I didn't.
Yes, you did. I wrote it down.
And I said that they should expand the historical district. I don't recollect that, but it's possible, because I'm getting old. But I didn't know.
Please clarify that.
Yeah, then Claire, here's your chance.
Well, here's the deal. I don't remember saying that, but perhaps I agreed, and that it's possible. I didn't really comment much on that because I don't know what they propose. I haven't really studied that, to be honest. So that's the deal. As far as property rights, we are for property. I mean, I'm for property rights. As far as you recollect about drinking and everything, I said that what's the difference between if people grow grapes or peaches? It's to me, it's the same thing. And I didn't support like closing down bars or anything like that, or wine things. That's not what I said, but it may have been interpreted that way. The historic thing, I think I skipped over because I know the guy with the gas station's upset, and you know what? I don't blame him, and I don't think the gas station has significant historical value, but I could be wrong.
So Tim, go ahead and go ahead and answer the question now about historic district expanding it. Do you think it's good?
No, I know there's an issue with that. I knew a guy that was putting a porch on over on one of those streets over by the middle school, and he applied to have a porch. It was like no big deal. He was going to make it look like the porch that was there before it probably deteriorated and fell apart. And I live in a house that's 102 years old, so I understand how that can happen. But they denied it, and he couldn't reapply to build that porch for 12 months. And that seems a little ridiculous. The other thing is, where I live, I'm just outside the historical district. And had I been in the historical district, I would have been required to use an architect to put a small addition onto the house. I felt good that I wasn't in the historical district for that reason, because that would have probably added another $15,000 or $20,000 to the bill, which was it turned out to be higher than my wife told me it was going to be. But so that would have been bad. So to answer your question, I don't know that much about it to speak with any kind of authority or intelligence, but I know that people have those problems, and I'm not necessarily, probably not in favor of expanding, just like the annexation thing. I don't think you should expand into neighborhoods without having, it's an ethical obligation to have some discussion with the homeowners. I hope that helps.
I was just waiting to use this line. The devil's in the details. What I said at the last forum was that with citizen input and with compensation, I was for the expansion of the historical district. I looked at a house on my island that had a double medallion, a city medallion and a state medallion. I walked away from it. Nobody could tell me what was the reason why I would ever want to engage in anything of that manner. So I'm not for rampant carte blanche taking a property by expanding the historical district. And when I say the devil's in the details, we didn't have any details with the question. Just generically speaking, that's the way I feel. And I don't want somebody coming along and taking one of my properties and putting restrictions on it if I don't get a substantial tax break or something of value.
So to be honest with you, I don't know what I said that night or not. I was so tense, and it was so restricted forum that we couldn't really talk freely. But let me tell you my position on annexation, on historical expansion. I don't believe you can do a general sweep of certain regions and says from this street to that street, now we're going to expand it and becomes historical district. I think that's a wrong decision. However, I believe if there is a historical building that has a historical significance, that adds to the culture and charm of the city, it is good to preserve that for the future and posterity that we have. And I think over the time, if a district, street, one after another goes through that process, eventually the system takes care of it and it becomes historical district eventually. But I don't believe right up front you have to do that. Now, A couple of other things that I have to mention. I have had the pleasure of sitting at City Council discussions when 2 buildings were designated as historical districts. The owners came to the City Council and pleaded their case. Obviously, they spent a lot of time, a lot of effort, they did a lot of research. In fact, the gentleman that owns the gas station, he even said he is willing to sign a contract letter with the city attorney to not change the building, not sell it without prior knowledge of the city, and he's willing to do that. And his point was, once you make me a historical district, you place all these restrictions on me, but you haven't told me why is this good for me. And that is a mistake that we're making with our citizens. And I think we ignored his comment, his address, and there was absolutely no reason that we could not have postponed that discussion for another 2 weeks or a month. Let the poor guy go, talk to the city officials, talk to the people, to the council, and alleviate his concerns and problems and bring it back. But we made a hit, we rushed through and made it a historical, and we have a disgruntled citizens, obviously, and we could have been potentially on a lawsuit. I'm not sure, maybe we are. But to answer your question again, I think if there is a historical value to a building that adds to the charm and history of this town, we should preserve it, but I don't believe in the street after the street just doing a sweep of the expansion.
Okay, we're going to take this question right here and then come back up front. Randy?
Thank you. My name is Randy Briley.
Right up to your mouth.
We moved here about almost 2 years ago, and I got involved in the visioning process that's going on right now in the city. And one of the aspects is B&Bs. In full disclosure, I own 2 of them, so just to be honest and transparent about that. One of the things we dug into in this process is we understand that the hot revenue in this town is really substantial. It's much more than we estimated originally. It's closer to $3 million. And from the county perspective, Gillespie, it's somewhere in the neighborhood of $750,000, give or take a little bit. So 5/7 of that, $2.2 million roughly, goes to the CVB today, and $500,000 from the county goes to the CVB as well. The balance of that for the city goes to various special interests, Nimitz and Pioneer Museum, great causes, all of them are great causes. We project that it increased from fiscal year 17 to 18, 13%, so $300,000+. And next year, because of the implementation of Article 5, it'll go up probably more than that. So I'm guessing 13 to 17%, so we're in that range. So my question is, how do you view the distribution of those hot funds today from a philosophy standpoint? How would you look at those as this continues to grow potentially, assuming B&Bs are unharmed? How would you look at those distribution of those funds in outlying years?
Thank you. Good question.
That was a good question, and an astute one. As far as the allocation goes, there's some, and maybe people don't know in this room, with the hotel conference center, you're going to let the developer keep all of that money over 20 years. Over 20 years. And so what does that mean? Well, if you get a finance guy to draw it out for you, that's about $10 million. Now, there's been some discussion, there's been some speculation that they're going to raise the hotel occupancy tax from 7 to 9%. There's been no validations of that, but my guess is that that's probably a way to subsidize that money that's going to that guy to make up for that gift to him. Okay? Now, there's some outside chance the state might do some kind of deal. It's like after a year, the state might drop their deal. That's purely speculation, and I don't know if that's going to happen. I kind of doubt it. But as far as the allocation of hotel occupancy tax money, that's one of the things I'm pretty familiar with. And if you read through the state of Texas, and you guys are into the law, that some of the allocation of that money has gone in the wrong direction. They haven't followed the letter of the law. First and foremost, you have to put heads in beds. It's got to generate people spending the night or helping with the convention activity. It hasn't always been the case that it's gone that way. I'm going to give you an example, and I use this so if I'm repeating myself, it's sort of just, you're hearing a repeat, it's not the new program, but at the chamber deal, there's a church on Main Street. It says specifically in that law, not if you read the Reader's Digest deal online, but if you read the whole law, it says you can't use in the central business district hot tax money for sidewalks, for lighting, for landscaping, and that's exactly what they did. Now they applied again for a restroom thing, and that was apparently turned down, but it also says you can't put restrooms in. But that's the state law. There's been some other kinds of interesting things where money, the CVB is totally funded by hotel occupancy tax. It's the 5/7 that this gentleman referred to. Some of that money's gone into the travel expense. If you look at the line item for the travel expense, and correct me if I'm wrong, it was over $60,000, wasn't it?
Yes.
And I think that wasn't somebody from the chamber or from the CVB, they went overseas to China. I don't see too many Chinese people coming here on tours. You really got to look at that. Those are big dollars. People don't fly to China for $10. It's really significant money. And on down the line, as far as where that money goes, it has to be looked at. And really, there should be somebody from the finance department and the legal department, and maybe they think they're doing that. But if somebody came in my office when I was at the Beverly Hills Hotel Corporation said, I want to fly to China, what are you talking about? We don't have an airport.
Randy, thanks for your question, and I'm going to give you the short answer. If I don't answer your question, let me know. I asked the question at the information session. There was 2 of them held after the B&B ordinance was passed, which I thought they should have been held before the ordinance was passed. But I asked the finance director, what was the audit process on hot tax money to ensure that it was being spent correctly, being spent in the way that it was applied for? And her answer was, I don't know. That same question came up at the most recent forum to the mayor, and she said, oh, there's a complete audit trail. So, to my knowledge, there is no audit trail, and I could be mistaken, but based on those 2 bits of it, that's my scenario at the moment.
Okay.
So, along the same line, I have to say the city council spends a lot of time look at all the applications, and they go through every one of them one by one and all of that. Now, admittedly, there are problems along the way, perhaps, and we disagree and so forth and so on. Not every system is perfect, and I'm not saying I'm in favor of that, but I think the question that has come up tonight, and it came up at the last forum, it lends itself to the confidence of people in the city government. If there was a confidence in city government and the conduct that we do, these kind of questions wouldn't really come up. So in order to alleviate that problem, I think it would be probably incumbent upon the city councils and all of us to perhaps have a non-partisan group of whatever it is, 3 or 4 or 5, that would be responsible for allocations of the HUD funds and make that recommendation to the council and then let the council approve it as such. And that would remove any kind of favoritisms or any kind of things that may be going on with that regard. So now, the HUD money itself, as you all know, is very restrictive according to the law. And first you got to put heads in the beds as they come in. Landscape stuff does not put heads in the beds. That's beautification of the city, and cities are obligated to do that anyhow. But then behind that, everything else that goes in that has to be in tourisms and advertisings to bring those heads into the town. And that's why they go by. But I think maybe it's time for us to take a look into a committee to look into that on behalf of the city council that have nothing to do with the HUD and all of that, and make the recommendation, and that would remove any kind of issue.
Thanks, Mo. Gary?
My name is Gary Countryman, and I'm the outsider looking in. I'm thinking about moving here, making this my home. So I'm a very concerned citizen when I hear everything that Mickey talked about earlier. The taxes are high, there's no water, what are you going to do when there's a drought? Where are you going to go to find a good economic place to live? The cost of living here is outrageous, and the property outrageous. I came from a little town called LaPorte. 25 years ago, I bought a house, paid $82,000 for it. You can sell it right now for $200,000. You can't even buy a house here for $200,000. Okay, you can't buy an acre of land here to build a house on for $2,000 or $3,000. And I see and what I heard on the radio was this is the per capita, the richest city in the state of Texas. Per capita here. And he said 1.9 billion. Okay, so there's a point here. The community, the people, these guys have an opportunity to come in here and do something. Me, looking at moving here, I want to know what they want to do. I've heard for the last 4 years, 8 years, 10 years that there's a gridlock with traffic. Nothing's been done. You have a shortage of water. Nothing's been done. Now I learned that the water here is going somewhere else. So if I decide to live here and I decide to spend the money, where's my water going to come from? How much is it going to cost me? If taxes keep going up, how am I going to afford to live here? If a middle-income person that makes $80,000 a year tries to pay for a $250,000 house, he's not going to live here very long. He can't afford to. So my question to y'all is this. Do you have a plan? Do you have a plan to solve the water? Do you have a plan to solve the gridlock? Do you have a plan to make it easy for a guy like me to want to come here and then go tell my friends, hey, this is the place you want to go? And it's affordable. All I hear is the rent on Main Street's too high. I heard one of the candidates last week tell me, oh, I live on Main Street, I work on Main Street, I walk on Main Street. Well, he sounds like the Wolf of Wall Street to me. How do you get to do that? How do you afford to live there and make those comments when everybody else struggles to pay their bills? So that's my question to y'all.
Thanks, Gary.
I'm not sure where to even start on that one, Gary. Thank you. I asked the question to the city manager if we made money providing utilities to Boot Ranch. Now, I'm not picking on Boot Ranch. There's a lot of details surrounding Boot Ranch that I don't have a clue on. But I look at everything from a bottom line. Does it make money? And that's the business person in me. I think that the city can run the same way. But my answer was, I don't know. That caused me a high level of concern. Now, I may not get the same answer from Charlie or Jerry or anybody else at the city. I haven't asked anybody else, but that caused me a high level of concern because we went 15 miles out of town to provide utilities. And somebody the other day, we had the affordable housing, obtainable housing discussion, and I went and met with Mimi Bartel, and I said, Mimi, I don't really have an issue with what you're asking for because it's in the big scheme of things, it's not a big deal. There's a lot of questions I would have for you that you may not like to have asked. One of them was, how much profit are you making when you ask the city to get into their pockets to subsidize your development? Now, again, I'm not knocking Mimi's project. I think it was great that she stood up and said what she felt like and she was ready to do something. But what if we, and this came from Mimi, so I'll give her credit for that, what if we ran utilities to Harper, we had affordable housing in Harper, and we run a shuttle where people can come in and go to work? Walmart does it, why can't we do it? Now, I'm not saying that I, like Mo, that I have all the answers, but I'm willing to probe and push and ask, and if somebody's done something like what we have an issue before, then we need to go look at them and talk to them and say, what did you do when you had this situation and what pitfalls can we avoid in tackling the same project? Key West has a shuttle. I put all the communication towers in Key West, and they have a shuttle down there. People hop on it. They can't park downtown. There's no parking on the streets, and there's not any real lots to speak of. So that's one of the things I think we need to find out. And I don't want to run off half-cocked, start spending money, start knocking somebody's suggestion about how to address the issue. Affordable housing, and I said this at the forum, and I said never 3 times, and they quoted me verbatim in the newspaper. I've never seen an affordable housing project where the taxpayers didn't take money out of their back pocket and greatly subsidize the project. Now, thank you. I'm not saying there's not one out there, but I don't know where it is. And if there's one out there, let's go take a look. Let's talk to them. Let's find out how they did it. Did it really come in to the affordability index that we're shooting for to get people to come and be able to work here and live here that make $15 an hour? And a $250,000 to $300,000 lot, which is what Mimi was proposing, that addresses one tiny small segment of the city. And yet we're going to take money and give it to those people, and then what's the waitress at Mama Sita's going to say when she's, well, where's mine? Where's my affordable housing? You know what? I don't have an answer for it. So I think it's a giant, monstrous issue, and I don't want to be knee-jerk and just start throwing money up in the air to address it. Thank you.
My name is Mo, but I don't have all the answers for you. So it's a complex issue. I recognize that, and but I do truly believe that the city cannot solve this problem. I think this problem can be solved by businesses and developers.
Come on.
Thank you. That's my core belief, because the core competency of the city is not in building housings and doing those kind of things. The businesses are in the business to make profit. If they come to the community and they notice there is a market for $150,000 homes and they want to make it and there is a profit to be made in there, believe me, they come and make it, because that's their job, that's what they want to do. Now, the city can do, honestly, and I disagree with Mr. Bob Watson, who said the city ought to take the lead on that. I disagree with that. I think the businesses ought to take the lead on that. In fact, I think the businesses ought to put their resources together, create what I would call a Fredericksburg Business Associations of some kind, to have a concerted effort in that area, and then bridge the gap with the county and the city for some reduction in regulations, perhaps, some incentives that they can provide in order to incentivize the developers to get that thing done. Now, our city, I have to say this, and the gentleman, Gary, talked about it is the most expensive place. There's no question about it. We have the lowest tax rates in the community, but we pay the highest tax value. And that is a smoke and mirror kind of a thing that we all need to be conscious of. At the end of the year, when you go and pay your taxes, that's what matters. It really doesn't matter that you are 0.256. It matters how much that 50 or 5,000 or 6,000 that you pay. And that is something that we need to curb. And there are options out there that we could explore with the city and the county in order to give some relief to the community as well.
Thanks, Mo. I believe, Susan, did you want to say something about Harper? See, when you started talking about Harper, I looked over at Susan. So, Susan.
I don't know if it's a question or if it's a statement. I read it was public, Mimi Bartel's, actually I think it was Nicole. Is that the sister? The daughter. Okay. It was Nicole and her little dissertation, if you will, about the affordable or attainable housing that she's putting out there on Facebook. It just kind of, it irks me, because I think there's a whole lot of people in here that are really smart, that own businesses, and we do it for a profit. She is coming out publicly and asking people in the construction industry, which that's me, that's my family. We build homes, we develop ranches, and we remodel homes. She's asking us to forgo profit. I'm not even going to ask y'all how you feel about it. Y'all are businessmen. I know how you feel. But I want you to know that that's being asked on the public forums out there for companies like mine to forgo profit.
Thank you, Susan. I appreciate it. And I know we're going to have a whole lot more cocktail. We're going to take one more question. We're on a hard break. This fellow's been real patient back here. And this will absolutely be the last question. And because the restaurant closes today.
Hi, guys. My name is James McDowell. I've got two questions, but they kind of tie in together. So we've heard a lot about fiscal responsibility. It's real easy. It rolls off the tongue, right? What does that mean? What does fiscal responsibility mean to each of you? That's an important consideration here.
I can answer that since I have been a project manager for Boeing for so many years. To me, what that means is you live within your means, in a nutshell. You're given a budget, you have to have an oversight of that budget and your expenses to make sure you deliver on time, you are on a schedule, and you meet your, like I said earlier, the citizens' expectation in this town. I would exercise a whole lot more oversight of that budget when it comes there. I would like to scrutinize everything that comes in there. Can we afford to pay for these things? Can we afford to postpone it for 2 years down the road and not incur that several $1 million this year at the expense of raising the taxes? To me, that's the kind of things. For me, for example, spending over $1 million on consultants over 22 months, that is a waste in my judgment. Some of it is justifiable, some of it is not, as I said. That is, to me, not a fiscal responsibility we have to exercise.
So could you sum up your answer by you would not be in favor of running a deficit?
I certainly would not, and I'm not in favor of raising. Look, as opposed to the businesses where they work for profit and they look at the ledgers at the end of the year and you have to match it and so forth and so on. The government, the way it is, you look through the budget every year and you go through these things. Every department submits their expenses and all of that. You add and subtract everything. At the end of it, it comes down to, oops, we got to raise 2 cents of taxes. And that is a wrong approach in my judgment. First, we ought to answer, why do we have to do that? Why do we have to have this, that, and the other things? And question everyone, if we can postpone certain things. Sports complex, for example, a good example of it. I just go back there. That could be an example for some management classes somewhere. But, you know, we wanted to accept $12.6 million on the development of that sports complex, plus $3.5 million for the purchase of the land. So $16 million project is not a pocket change. But we were bold enough to say, well, it's going to be 3.5 cents a property tax increase. We never talked about what can I do to phase this out. I can chew perhaps $1 million this year without raising the taxes, let it go for 2 years and see how the citizens react to it. 2 years down the road with the property taxes going up or whatever, and I have more income, I can spend another $1 million and so forth. Have a phased approach to that thing, but we went ahead and wanted to raise the tax. That's the kind of things that I would like to have more of an oversight and accountability in the city government.
Thanks. That was a really good last question, especially that's one of our 5 principles is fiscal responsibility.
I'll make it short before the lights go out. But that's what usually happens. But you know, looking at it, yeah, we can't go deficit. And one of the things that concerns me is that going back to the sportsplex, when they bought that property, okay, 52 acres, they sold, and they already had it set up to do 10 acres to the county. Now they got nearly $700,000, okay, from the county for those 10 acres. So when you take where you have to be to not deficit spend and work backwards, and you start looking at, well, wait a second, Patrick Klein, the CPA, just did an audit, and he said, well, it was pretty good, and you have we covered all of the state and federal mandated reserves. They have reserves of 3 times this kind of money, 3 times that kind of money. So those are reserves that are not available. Okay, you have to have those by mandate. Okay, so at the end of the year, they had $500,000 in reserve. Now do the math. $700,000 for the property to the county, $500,000 reserve. If they hadn't sold that property, folks, make no mistake, if they hadn't sold that property to the county, they would have come up short on the reserves as federally or state mandated.
You're going to like my answer because it's going to be real short. You don't spend more than you bring in, and you don't always have to spend every dime that you bring in.
We are up against a hard break. The restaurant closes at 8. The employees want to go home at 8. I'm sure these guys will hang out and visit with you as long as you want to, and if they're not willing to do that, they don't need to be running. So they will hang out and visit with you outside. Thank you. We'll see you next month at Texas Hill Country University.